The Chipko movement is a forest conservation movement in India, opposed to commercial logging and the government's policies on deforestation. Protesters in the 1970s engaged in tree hugging, wrapping their arms around trees so that they could not be felled. On April 24, 1973, the Gandhian social worker Chandi Prasad Bhatt rallied the women of Mandal in the Garhwal division to stop Symonds, a company manufacturing sports products, from cutting down trees. The women embraced the trees and prevented them from being cut. The action started what has become famous as the Chipko movement. Today, beyond the socialism hue, it is seen increasingly as an ecofeminist movement. Although many of its leaders were men, women were not only its backbone but also its mainstay, because they were the ones most affected by the rampant deforestation which led to a lack of firewood and fodder as well as water for drinking and irrigation. Over the years, they also became primary stakeholders in a majority of the afforestation work that happened under the Chipko movement. Chipko was successful primarily because of the simplicity of method and the involvement of local people for whom it was about regaining control over natural resources. However, not many people know that the similar agitation dates back to the 18th century and was started by Rajasthan's Bishnoi community. The incident has been etched in the annals of history for the sacrifice of group of villagers who, led by lady named Amrita Devi, laid down their lives while protecting trees from being felled on the orders of the then king of Jodhpur. After this incident, the king in a royal decree banned cutting of trees in all Bishnoi villages. Inspired by Karan Singh and the Jyoti Kumari movement in the year 1964, the Dasholi Gram Swarajya Sangh, the Dasholi Society for Village Self-Rule, was set up by Chandi Prasad Bhatt in Chamoli, Gopeshwar, with an aim to set up small industries using the resources of the forest. Their first project was a small workshop making farm tools for local use. Its name was later changed to DGSM from the original Dasholi Gram Swarajya Sangh in the 1980s. Here they had to face restrictive forest policies, a hangover of colonial era still prevalent, as well as the contractor system, in which these pieces of forest land were commoditized and auctioned to big contractors, usually from the plains, who brought along their own skilled and semi-skilled laborers, leaving only the menial jobs like hauling rocks for the hill people, and paying them next to nothing. On the other hand, the hill regions saw an influx of more people from the outside, which only added to the already strained ecological balance. Hastened by increasing hardships, the Garhwal Himalayas soon became the center for a rising ecological awareness of how reckless deforestation had denuded much of the forest cover, resulting in the devastating Alaknanda River floods of July 1970, when a major landslide blocked the river and affected an area starting from Hanuman Chatti near Badrinath to 320 kilometers downstream till Haridwar. Further, numerous villages, bridges, and roads were washed away. Thereafter, incidents of landslides and land subsidence became common in an area which was experiencing a rapid increase in civil engineering projects. Villagers, including women, began to organize themselves under several smaller groups. It was started in 1973, taking up local causes with the authorities and stand up against commercial logging operations that threaten their livelihoods. In October 1971, the DGSS workers held a demonstration in Gopeshwar to protest against the policies of the Forest Department. More rallies and marches were held in late 1972, but to little effect. Until a decision to take Shaurya, direct action was taken. The first such occasion occurred when the Forest Department turned down the DGS's annual request for 10 ash trees for its farm tools workshop and instead awarded a contract for 300 trees to Symonds Company, a sporting good manufacturer in distant Allahabad, to make tennis rackets. In March 1973, the lumbermen arrived at Gopeshwar, and after a couple of weeks, they were confronted at village Mandal on 24 April 1973, where about 100 villagers and DGSS workers were beating drums and shouting slogans, thus forcing the contractors and their lumbermen to retreat. This was the first confrontation of the movement. The contract was eventually cancelled and awarded to the DGSS instead. By now, the issue had grown beyond the mere procurement of an annual quota of the ash trees and encompassed a growing concern over commercial logging and the government's forest policy, which the villagers saw as unfavorable towards them. The DGSS also decided to resort to tree hugging or Chipko as a means of non-violent protest. But the struggle was far from over, as the same company was awarded more ash trees in the Phata forest 80 km away from Gopeshwar. Here again, due to local opposition, starting on 20 June 1974, the contractors retreated after a standoff that lasted a few days. Thereafter, the villagers of Phata and Tarsali formed a vigil group and watched over the trees until December, when they had another successful standoff. When the activists reached the site in time, the lumbermen retreated, leaving behind the 5 ash trees that failed. A few months later, the final flashpoint began when the government announced an auction scheduled in January 1974 for 2,500 trees near Reni village, overlooking the Alaknanda river. Bhatt set out for the villages in the Reni area and incited the villagers, who decided to protest against the auction of the government by hugging the trees. Over the next few weeks, rallies and meetings continued in the Reni area. On 25 March 1974, the day the lumbermen were to cut the trees, the men of Reni village and DGSS workers were in Chamoli, diverted by the state government and contractors to a fictional compensation payment site, while back home laborers arrived by the truckload to start logging operations. A local girl rushed to inform Gaura Devi, the head of the village Mahila Mangal Dal at Reni village. Gaura Devi led 27 of the village women to the site and confronted the loggers. When all talking failed and the loggers started to shout and abuse the women, threatening them with guns, the women resorted to hugging the trees to stop them from being felled. The women kept an all-night vigil, guarding their trees against the cutters until a few of them relented and left the village. The next day, when the men and leaders returned, the news of the movement spread to the neighboring Lata and other villages, including Henwal Ghati, and more people joined in. Eventually, after a 4-day standoff, the contractors left. This was a turning point for Chipko, as it marked the first time that the initiative by women, especially when their menfolk were not around. The news soon reached the state capital, where the state chief minister, Hemwati Nandan Bahuguna, set up a committee to look into the matter, which eventually ruled in favor of the villagers. This became a turning point in the history of eco-development struggles in the region and around the world. The struggle soon spread across many parts of the region, and such spontaneous standoffs between the local community and timber merchants occurred at several locations, with hill women demonstrating their newfound power as non-violent activists. As the movement gathered shape under its leaders, the name Chipko movement was attached to their activities. According to historians, the term originally used by Bhatt was the word Angalvalta in the Garhwal language for embrace, which later was adopted to the Hindi word Chipko, which means to stick. Over the next 5 years, the movement spread to many districts in the region, and within a decade throughout the Uttarakhand Himalayas. Larger issues of ecological and economic exploitation of the region were raised. The villagers demanded that no forest exploiting contracts should be given to outsiders, and local communities should have effective control over natural resources like land, water, and forests. They wanted the government to provide low-cost materials to small industries and ensure development of the region without disturbing the ecological balance. The movement took up economic issues of landless forest workers and asked for guarantees of minimum wage. Globally, Chipko demonstrated how environment causes, up until then considered an activity of the rich, were a matter of life and death for the poor, who were all too often the first ones to be devastated by an environmental tragedy. In 1977, in another area, women tied sacred threads, called Rakhi, around trees destined for felling. According to the Hindu tradition of Raksha Bandhan, the Rakhi signifies a bond between brother and sisters. They declared that the trees would be saved even if it cost them their lives. Women's participation in the Chipko agitation was a very novel aspect of the movement. The forest contractors of the region usually doubled up as suppliers of alcohol to men. Women held sustained agitations against the habit of alcoholism and broadened the agenda of the movement to cover other social issues. The movement achieved a victory when the government issued a ban on felling of trees in the Himalayan regions for 15 years in 1980 by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi until the green cover was fully restored. One of the prominent Chipko leaders, Gandhian Sunderlal Bahuguna, took a 5,000-kilometer trans-Himalaya foot march in 1981 to 83, spreading the Chipko message to a far greater area. Gradually, women set up cooperatives to guard local forests and also organized fodder production at rates conducive to local environment. Next, they joined in land rotation schemes for fodder collection, helped replant degraded land, and established and ran nurseries stocked with species they selected. Both female and male activists did play pivotal roles in the movement, including Gaura Devi, Sudesha Devi, Bachni Devi, Chandi Prasad Bhatt, Sunderlal Bahuguna, Govind Singh Rawat, Dhum Singh Negi, Shamsher Singh Bisht, and Ghanshyam Raturi, the Chipko poet whose songs are still popular in the Himalayan region. Chandi Prasad Bhatt was awarded the Raymond Magsaysay Award in 1982, and Sunderlal Bahuguna was awarded the Padma Vibhushan in 2009. In Tehri district, Chipko activists would go on to protest limestone mining in the Doon Valley in the 1980s. As the movement spread through the Dehradun district, which had earlier seen deforestation of its forest cover leading to heavy loss of flora and fauna. Finally, quarrying was banned after years of agitation by Chipko activists, followed by a vast public drive for afforestation, which turned around the valley just in time. Also in the 1980s, activists like Bahuguna protested against construction of the Tehri Dam on the Bhagirathi River, which went on for the next 2 decades, before founding the Bij Bachao Andolan, the Save the Seeds movement that continues to the present day. Over time, as the United Nations Environment Programme report mentioned, Chipko activists started working a socio-economic revolution by winning control of their forest resources from the hands of a distant bureaucracy which is only concerned with the selling of forest land for making urban-oriented products. The Chipko movement became a benchmark for socio-ecological movements in other forest areas of Himachal Pradesh, Rajasthan and Bihar. In September 1983, Chipko inspired a similar Apiko movement in Karnataka, where tree felling in the Western Ghats and the Vindhyas was stopped. In Kumaon region, Chipko took on a more radical tone, combining with the general movement for a separate Uttarakhand state, which was eventually achieved in 2001. In recent years, the movement not only inspired numerous people to work on practical programs of water management, energy conservation, afforestation, and recycling, but also encouraged scholars to start studying issues of environmental degradation and methods of conservation in the Himalayas and throughout India. On 26 March 2004, Reni, Lata and other villages of the Niti Valley celebrated the 30th anniversary of the Chipko movement. There all the surviving original participants united. The celebration started at Lata, the ancestral home of Gaura Devi, where Pushpa Devi, wife of late Chipko leader Govind Singh Rawat, Dhum Singh Negi, Chipko leader of Henwal Ghati, Tehri Garhwal, and others were celebrated. From here, a procession went to Reni. This marked the beginning of worldwide methods to improve the present situation. Recently, by following the legacy of the Chipko movement, in 2017, rapid deforestation over the century-old trees, forming almost a canopy and Jesore Road of the district of North 24 Parganas, West Bengal, has also sparked a huge movement in the form of the campaign of saving 4,000 trees by the local masses. International ecologists saw Chipko as a cultural response of the people's love for their environment. Chipko was popularized by the feminist movement, who pointed out that village women have to walk long distances to collect fuel and fodder, and they became the first victims of forest destruction. Ecofeminists argued that women are therefore closer to nature and more ecologically conscious. If you enjoyed this video, then please like and share this video. Do subscribe to the channel and don't forget to click the bell icon.